what preparations did we do before we started homeschooling? Hi, I'm Amadi, and this is my lovely wife, Shanita. We live in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C.
Initially, um, we decided that I would stay home with the kids when they were little and they wouldn't go to daycare. So that's kind of how the just being home with them consistently started. And then when our oldest got old enough for pre-K, we attempted to enroll her in pre-K, but it was a means tested program, which simply means if you earn over a certain income, you are not eligible for the program. And so we were at a point, we had done ABCs, numbers, colors, and I felt she was ready for something more. So that sparked the interest in looking into actually homeschooling.
Initially, I was the driver for homeschool. It's not something that my wife and I, we were either one of us were familiar with. Um, but just knowing a lot of the things that our children would be introduced to, particularly at that young age, I thought it was something that we should explore. And so we looked up a couple different programs to assist us with starting on that journey of homeschool.
This is all we've ever done. So this is going into our 10th year. So when my oldest started kindergarten or pre-K 4 up until now, and she is in her second semester of seventh grade.
Outside of our own education, I always say I'm married up. My wife, my wife has all she has all these degrees, but outside of our own personal education, um, I know we're people that like to do a lot of research, and so we researched a lot of programs, what they offered, what they provide. Are we capable of integrating those things into what we do? And I think my wife has a great story about what really gave her the oomph.
The definitely what gave me the confidence and the courage to begin homeschooling is when our oldest child turned 4. She had blended letters, sounds, numbers, and I knew the next step was to teach her to blend words so that she could make sentences and read. And once we covered through, we used a generic phonics program, and I mean, within a few weeks, she was reading. We used some online resources to kind of help supplement. And once she started reading, that was all the confidence I needed. As my husband mentioned, I have a social work background, so I studied heavily in human behavior and child development. So I felt like I had that aspect of it. But once I taught her to read, it was just easy from that point. Some of the feelings that I had initially, I mean, I was terrified, I was frightened. I knew this is something that we were supposed to do, but we did not have very many examples. Nobody in our family homeschooled, nobody in our age group was homeschooling. We knew one couple that had homeschooled, but they were kind of on the down end of it with like high schoolers. So we never really got to see in action how when you have a kindergarten or a first grader or a second grader. And I mean, there were a lot of nights that I questioned, okay, is this really what we're supposed to do? And then we just made an agreement, I think, to take 1 year at a time. It's not something we said, oh, we'll always homeschool and never do anything else, but we'll just take it 1 year at a time. And as each year has progressed, we've gained more confidence. We've been able to overcome some challenges and trying to find the right curriculum for the different ages that we have, because we have 3 different ages, 3 different grade levels. And just because you have a curriculum that worked for your oldest does not necessarily mean it would work for your middle child or multiple children. So you kind of get to tailor make the thing. So those were some of the challenges that it was a little difficult to overcome in the beginning, but we're 10-year veterans now.
Oh boy, what preparations did we do before we started homeschooling? Again, like I said earlier, investigating some programs. I think one of the mistakes that people make is just thinking, all right, well, I got this. I'm just going to teach them what I learned. And it doesn't work like that because no one remembers everything they were taught. Um, it's not it's not natural. And then two, we're not experts. We are not experts in any one particular field. So I know we had looked up a couple different programs
Mhm.
when our oldest daughter was in kindergarten, and trying to find something again, as my wife said, that we could tailor make for our children. It wasn't, a cookie cutter. Everybody gets the same thing as you get in most institutional schools. So investigating some programs, finding other resources that are available. Once you start to look up things, you are actually overwhelmed with the amount of things that are out there, um, that are not, publicized, because clearly you would be taken from the educational system when you do that. But there are things out there. So those are some of the things that we did, initially getting into homeschooling our children.
And I think just researching to find the correct fit for our family. So there were lots of homeschool programs and homeschool co ops and curriculum programs will host information meetings, they'll host open houses. So I plugged myself into every homeschool resource possible. And what I found is that once you plug into that small niche of people, you realize it's a bigger world than just you and your family's desire to homeschool. So I put my name on different email listservs. So I was getting notifications when a new program was starting, or the library was hosting something, or a 4-H club was hosting something. And so from that action, I was able to schedule a lot of meetings with some of the leaders in these programs and interview them, bring the children in, let them sit in for a day and see how they operate, and just to get a good feel for which one was going to work for us. And initially, that's how we decided on the program that we started in, and that's the program that we're in today. Whew. Advice that we'd give parents who want to consider homeschooling. You definitely have to pray. You definitely have to pray, because when it gets hard and when you become overwhelmed and you are exhausted and you want to throw them back into whatever school system you possibly can, or just shove them out the door on the bus, something has to hold you to what you were called to do. Also, you have to find other people who are doing homeschool or some kind of alternative education for that support. Everyone knows that parenting is a really difficult job, and it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, until they're however old when they leave your home. And, one of the things that the primary homeschool, whether it's moms or dads, because we've seen both, um, that there is a level of exhaustion that is unexplainable. And you have to learn to take breaks. You have to learn to set boundaries. So from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed, it's you and the students or your children. And
Mhm.
so you have to, okay, after we finish schoolwork and we wrap up and it's dinner time, I'm not answering school related questions. We have to be able to tie it off at some point. Another piece of advice I would give a family wanting to homeschool is that understanding homeschool becomes who you are as a family, and not necessarily something you do Monday through Friday from 8 to 2:30, your typical school hours. It becomes a part of who you are, like your faith or anything that you hold true value. It becomes in everything that you do. So there's never not a teachable moment in the home. So if you have to work and homeschool, that's possible. If you have to work part-time and homeschool, that's possible. If you have to homeschool on the nights and weekends, that is possible. And so I would just really encourage people to, just really take some time to try to think about all of those options to see, where it is that you'll get your start.
I think that make sure that if you want to homeschool, there are just some practical things. I think my wife gave a lot of good overarching themes that you got to make sure is, you know, incorporated throughout your duration. But definitely, if you want to begin homeschooling, you both have to be on the same page. So if it's a mom and a dad, we understand that there are single parents and people have to make decisions on their own. But if it's mom and dad, you got to be on the same page. If one person wants to homeschool and the other person doesn't see value in homeschooling, I would advise against homeschooling until you both are on the same page. The other component is, just being realistic, there is a financial component. And because homeschooling becomes who you are as a family, especially initially, you have to make some financial decisions, because more than likely, as your children get older and the education becomes more strenuous, whoever is the primary homeschooler is going to have to devote more time to your children. And so, when my wife and I first started homeschooling, she was still working, and then she went to part time, and she was working part time for a year, and then it got to a point where the amount of work that she was having to put forth um, homeschooling just wasn't enough time in the day for her to devote any other attention to working outside of the home. So we made the decision a few years ago for her to fully come off of all working outside the home. And so, but those are decisions you have to make. You don't stumble into those things. You have to talk about it, sit down, and really consider all the options. Use a Bible scripture. There's a scripture in Luke that says before you build a home, you have to first count the cost. Homeschooling is such a major undertaking that you got to really count the cost before you fully invest yourself into it. So I would encourage any families out there that are considering homeschooling, just know it's more than just your kids getting information inside your house. There are a lot of other ancillary things that are involved with an undertaking like homeschooling. The most beneficial thing that I've found from homeschooling is the fact that, as my wife stated earlier, you can tailor make your curriculum for each child. Whereas in most institutional settings, education or other, everything is cookie cutter. Everyone gets the same thing. Whereas in homeschooling, you can tailor make your thing. So initially, when we started to homeschool, it was for spiritual reasons. We didn't want our kids to engage with a lot of godlessness, particularly at a very young age. But as they've gotten older, we've also seen the value culturally, for them to be able to learn things that just are not taught in schools. There are a lot of other aspects of history and sociology and things that we can, impart to our children that they wouldn't get in school. Things that we learned as adults that our children are able to learn, growing up. So I would say that, see the benefit, not just the, oh goodness, this is overwhelming, but also see the benefits, that there are tremendous benefits for homeschooling, and know that it's going to require it's going to require a lot of you. So
A whole lot of you.
yeah.
But as my husband mentioned, you reclaim so much of your own education. You'll get to the point where you're like, I want a refund for my education. Like you realize so much that was missed. There's such a gap. But the beauty of it is that you're learning alongside with your student, and you're learning it now in this stage of your life as an adult with life experiences under your belt. So people who would say things to me, well, I wasn't good at math in school, I don't think I can homeschool, or I didn't get a degree and I don't think I can homeschool. It has nothing to do with that. If you are a parent of a child and you have a desire and a heart and the financial means to not be working, to have one person come off their job full time, it's very possible. And, that's why they have math tutors and other co ops where you can kind of sign up for different courses a la carte. So if you have a child that's really interested in STEM or chemistry and things of that nature, there are co ops designed just for that. So don't feel like you, as the parent teacher, have to be, as my husband mentioned, the expert in every single area. That's humanly impossible. That's why even in high school, they change periods, they change subjects, different teachers. And so there is just a whole world of education that is at our disposal. We just have to do the research and search it out.